Tonight, the alcove holds the quiet that comes after rain. A soft and silver quiet resting against the high, narrow windows, where the glass still remembers every drop that touched it. Beyond this small room, the greater archive sleeps behind tall shelves and closed doors. But here the ceiling curves low and close, and the stone floor keeps the last warmth of a hearth that has burned patiently through the evening. The Night Archivist settles beside the fire, with a woolen cloth drawn loosely over the shoulders, listening not for words, but for the spaces between them. There is no hurry here. There is nothing to solve, nothing to hold tightly, and nothing that must be carried into morning. The night has its own slow way of keeping time, and the body may follow it without effort. Set into the wall beside the hearth is a shallow niche of pale limestone, and inside that niche rest 4 small wrapped objects. They are not grand treasures, not crowns or weapons or shining statues, only quiet remnants, each one small enough to be held in the palm. Yet together, they carry the long and doubled story of a god who was never only one thing. The first bundle is unwrapped, slowly. A broken curve of pale clay appears beneath the cloth, its edge faintly marked by the dark remains of an ancient wax seal. It may once have belonged to a wine jar, long emptied, long broken, long returned to dust and memory. Even now, in the warmth of the hand, it seems to carry the faintest scent of old fruit, not fresh enough to taste, only soft enough to imagine. This is where the story begins. Not with a banquet, not with a loud procession, but with a name pressed into clay. Long before the theatres of Athens filled with voices, and long before poets shaped his stories into the forms remembered today, the name of Dionysus was already waiting on Mycenaean tablets from Pylos, written in the old Linear B script, among ordinary records of palace life. There is something restful in that old discovery, the way a simple tablet can quietly correct a louder story. Later generations often called Dionysus a stranger, a god who arrived from far away. Yet the clay remembers him earlier than that, already present, already named, already woven into the old world before anyone thought to explain where he came from. He is not easy to hold in one shape. He is the god of the vine and the slow ferment of fruit. He is the god of ivy, masks, music, theater, release, and the strange freedom that comes when a person sets down, for a little while, the careful face worn during ordinary days. He belongs to the hillside and the city, to the wild song and the measured chorus, to the cup passed between friends, and the quiet stage where grief becomes art. For a sleep story, it is enough to know that he moves between opposites without needing to choose only one. He is gentle and unsettling, ancient and always arriving, hidden and suddenly revealed. Most of all, he is a god of loosening, the one who reminds the closed hand to open, the tired breath to deepen, and the crowded mind to make room for a softer kind of knowing. In the oldest and more mysterious telling, kept by quiet religious circles known as the Orphic tradition, the god was born first as a child called Zagreus. His mother was Persephone, queen of the underworld, who knew both the upper world of light and the lower world of shadow. His father, Zeus, loved him dearly, and, in a strange gesture of divine confidence, placed the child upon his own throne. The image is almost too large for such a small beginning. An infant on the seat of heaven, tiny hands near the lightning, no other god was allowed to carry. The archive does not dwell on the danger of that moment. It notices instead the tenderness within it. A father imagining a future for a child, a throne warmed for a little while by new life, and a world that had not yet turned toward sorrow. But old stories often move through shadow before they return to rest. Hera, the queen of the gods, saw the child and felt the old ache of jealousy rise within her. She turned to the Titans, those ancient powers from an earlier age, and asked them to take away what had been given. They came quietly, and the child, still young enough to trust bright things, was drawn away by toys and mirrors and small carved shapes. What followed belongs to a deep and sorrowful corner of myth, and it need not be seen closely. The child changed form again and again, trying to slip beyond harm, but even change could not shelter him forever. The story lowers its voice here, as any kind story would. It allows the old grief to remain at a distance, softened by centuries, remembered without being relived. Zeus answered that loss with fire, and the Titans were reduced to pale ash upon the mountain. Then the tale turns in a way that is both strange and strangely comforting. From that ash, the Orphic teachers said, humanity was formed. Because the Titans had briefly held the divine child within them, every human being carried two natures from the beginning, one heavy and earthly, one small and bright. The earthly part forgets. It fears, grasps, and wanders. The bright part remembers something older than fear. It is only a spark, perhaps no larger than the glow inside a low ember, but it remains. In that old teaching, a life well lived was the gentle work of quieting the heavier nature and tending the small inner flame until it could find its way home. The fire beside the archivist settles softly in the hearth. A thin warmth moves across the stone, and the clay fragment rests in an open palm, no longer cold. There is no need to hold the names too firmly. Zagreus, Persephone, Titans, ash. They may pass like shapes seen through rain, each one appearing, softening, and fading back into the larger dark. The first birth did not end the story. Something of the child survived, the old tellers said, carried away and kept safe. Some traditions speak of his heart, preserved by Athena and brought back to Zeus, waiting for a second beginning. In a story like this, even loss is not an ending. It becomes a seed hidden in the earth, quiet for a season, preparing to rise again. The second birth came through Semele, a mortal princess of Thebes. She loved Zeus, and she carried within her the god who was to be born again. It might have unfolded gently, as mortal births do, month by month, beneath an ordinary sky. But Hera returned in disguise and persuaded Semele to ask a dangerous favor to see Zeus, not in softened form, but as he truly was. Zeus had promised to grant her any wish, and a divine promise could not be taken back. When he appeared in his full brightness, the nearness of that power was more than a mortal body could bear. The story does not linger there. It simply bows its head and lets Semele pass gently from the world of ordinary telling into the protected distance of legend. Yet the child was not lost. Zeus drew the unfinished god from that final brightness and held him within his own body, sewn carefully into his thigh, hidden there until the time of birth was complete. It is a strange image, but a tender one too. A father becoming shelter, a wound becoming cradle, a second chance growing quietly in the dark. When the time came, the stitches were loosened, and Dionysus stepped into the light again. The seasons crowned him with ivy, evergreen and patient. Hermes carried him away to be raised by nurses and nymphs, far from Hera's anger, in valleys where water moved slowly over stones, and a small, ivy-crowned child could grow without needing to understand the weight of his own beginning. The clay fragment is wrapped again in its cloth and returned to the limestone niche. It has carried enough for now. The throne, the ash, the mortal mother, the second birth. Outside the high windows, the last memory of rain rests quietly on the glass. Inside, the hearth glows low, and the room asks nothing further of anyone listening. After a time, the archivist reaches for the second bundle. The cloth opens to reveal a dry length of fennel stalk, wound with ivy that has faded from green into a pale, papery brown. It is a fragment of a thyrsus, the wand carried by followers of Dionysus. Even brittle and still, it seems to remember movement, as if it once swayed beneath moonlight, in the hands of someone who had briefly forgotten to be afraid. Dionysus did not move into the world as a calm and settled god. Hera's jealousy followed him, and in one old telling, a kind of divine madness drove him far from home. He wandered through Egypt and Syria, crossing old roads, river valleys, and sunlit hillsides, carrying with him the secret of the vine. Wherever he passed, the world seemed to learn another way for fruit to ripen. The word madness can sound sharp in the ear, especially at night, so the story handles it gently. In this telling, it is less a storm than a wandering fog, a period when even a god could not fully gather himself. He moved from place to place, and the vine moved with him, rooting itself in new soil, climbing trellises, curling toward light, and waiting for its season. There was a king in Egypt named Proteus, famous in story for changing shape, and it is fitting that a shape-shifting king should receive a god who had not yet settled into himself. The old world often placed one mystery beside another in this way. A wandering god arrives before a changing king, and for a little while, both are simply allowed to be difficult to define. The fennel stalk rests across the archivist's palm. Its papery ivy makes a faint, dry sound, no louder than a leaf crossing stone. The room grows quieter around that sound. The fire no longer crackles often, only breathes now and then beneath the ash. The listener does not need to follow every country, every road, every name. The story itself will carry what matters. During these wandering years, another tale took root. One the poets told with unusual tenderness. Dionysus had a beautiful young companion named Ampelus, whose name meant vine. The two moved through the world with the ease of youth, sharing games and laughter under a sky that did not yet seem to be keeping account. But youth is not always protected by beauty, and Ampelus was lost too early in an old hillside misfortune involving a great bull. The story has no need to make that moment heavy. It simply lets the god feel what any heart would feel when something beloved is gone before its time. Grief came to him, and for once, the god who brought release to others had to learn how to release sorrow himself. In the softest version of the tale, Dionysus did not allow that grief to remain only grief. He reached toward the lost body of Ampelus and drew it upward into a new shape, curling tendrils, broad leaves, and clusters of dark fruit hanging in the sun. The first grapevine rose from love transformed, and the world received a sweetness born from sorrow. Dionysus gathered that first fruit and pressed it into wine. He shared it, not as a thing to forget pain, but as a thing that could carry pain into fellowship. Wine, in this older meaning, was not merely excess. It was memory softened enough to be passed from hand to hand, a reminder that even grief, given time and care, may become something that helps a table feel less empty. The archivist holds the thyrsus fragment in both hands now, letting its dry weight settle. Somewhere beyond the room, water from the old rain has found a path through a gutter and fallen silent. The body may settle too. Shoulders may loosen. The breath may widen. A story about wandering does not require the listener to wander with it. The listener may remain here, safe in the alcove, while the god continues along the old roads. The gift of wine eventually reached many hands, and not every hand understood it wisely. This brings the story to King Midas of Phrygia, a ruler remembered for hospitality, foolishness, and a lesson that softened him before it was too late. Midas once found Silenus, the elderly companion of Dionysus, wandering tired and lost among the royal gardens. Instead of laughing at the old satyr or turning him away, Midas welcomed him. For 10 days, he offered food, comfort, and respect. Then he brought Silenus safely back to Dionysus. The god was grateful and offered the king a single favor, any wish his heart desired. Midas, dazzled by possibility, asked that everything he touched turn to gold. For one bright morning, the wish seemed wonderful. Twigs became gold. Stones became gold. The smallest ordinary things shone beneath his hands. Then the king reached for bread, and it hardened before he could eat. He lifted wine to his lips, and it became cold metal. In that quiet moment, surrounded by treasure, Midas understood that not every shining thing can nourish a life. He asked to be freed, and Dionysus did not prolong the lesson. The god sent him to wash in the river Pactolus, beneath Mount Tmolus. Midas lowered his hands into the current, and the golden power slipped away from him into the water. From then on, the old storytellers said, the river carried golden sands, a soft reminder of a wish released in time. The thyrsus is wrapped again and returned to its place. The alcove feels warmer now, though the fire has grown smaller. The second relic has spoken of wandering, grief, vines, and mercy. It leaves behind no command, only a quiet impression that what is lost may change form. What is foolish may be forgiven, and what is held too tightly may be washed away. The third bundle waits in the limestone niche. When the cloth opens, it reveals a broken half of a terracotta mask, one curve of cheek, one hollow eye, and the faint remains of ochre and blue paint. It does not smile, and it does not frown. It simply waits, as old masks do, wearing the calm expression of something that has seen many faces come and go. Dionysus is a god of masks, because a mask is never only a hiding place. Sometimes it conceals, and sometimes it reveals. Sometimes a person must wear another face to speak a truth that ordinary daylight would not allow. In the theater, in ritual, and in dream, the mask gives form to what has been moving silently beneath the surface. There is a danger, the old stories say, in thinking that what is hidden is therefore empty. Some kings learned that slowly. One of them was Pentheus of Thebes, a young ruler whose own family was tied to the god, though he refused to believe it. When Dionysus came to Thebes, disguised as a traveling priest, Pentheus saw only a stranger disturbing the order of his city. The king ordered the visitor bound and held in the palace, yet the knots loosened on their own, quietly and without struggle, as if the cords had simply remembered that they were only cords. Dionysus walked free. The king grew more certain, not less. Certainty can do that sometimes. It can tighten around a person until even wonder looks like a threat. The god did not meet him first with thunder. Instead, the story moves toward the wooded slopes of Mount Kithyron, where the women of Thebes had gathered in Dionysus's rites. Pentheus, drawn by curiosity and pride, went to see what he had forbidden. He wanted to look upon the mystery without entering it, to judge from a distance what he had never allowed himself to understand. The mask rests lightly in the palm, and the room grows still around it. A small sound comes from the hearth as a coal shifts and settles. There is no need to go quickly up the mountain. There is no need to imagine harsh details. The night is kind enough to keep certain things far away, where they can be understood without being seen. What happened to Pentheus became one of the old world's great warnings. The women on the mountain were deep in a sacred fervor, no longer seeing as they would have seen in ordinary daylight. Among them was the king's own mother. By morning, the rites had ended. The mountain had grown quiet, and Thebes was left with grief and a knowledge it could not easily set down. The story is not here to frighten the listener. It is here to soften an old lesson. Pentheus did not fall because he was curious. Curiosity can be gentle. He fell because he met mystery with contempt, and because he tried to control what needed to be approached with humility. Some doors in life do not open to force. They open only when the hand becomes quiet. Another ruler, Lycurgus of the Edonians, also resisted the god. He drove Dionysus and his followers from a sacred hillside, mocking the vine and clinging to harsher ways. What followed was not a single thunderclap, but a long unraveling. His sight failed, his judgment failed. His fields grew barren, as though the land itself had grown tired of his refusal. In time, Lycurgus's people came to believe that his stubbornness had become a wound in the kingdom. His story faded into warning, then into memory, and then into the gray distance where old warnings become almost peaceful. Not because they were light, but because time has carried away their sharpest edges. The mask is turned once in the archivist's hand. Its faded paint catches a small breath of firelight. It reminds the room that Dionysus was never only a god of punishment. The deeper teaching is gentler than that. He offered release to people who lived too tightly bound, too watched, too governed by fear and duty. His rites opened a protected space where ordinary identities could loosen for one night. The Greeks sometimes spoke of ecstatic nearness to the god, not simply as disorder, but as a sacred unbinding. A person could step outside the narrow room of the self and return changed, not destroyed. The danger came when release was denied with cruelty, or entered without reverence, or mocked by those who feared anything they could not command. The little mask returns to its cloth. The alcove receives it back without sound. 3 relics now rest together in the niche clay: ivy and painted terracotta, birth, wandering, and the lessons of the mountain have each been carried as far as they need to be carried tonight. The listener may let them blur. Nothing important will be lost if sleep begins to take the edges from the story. The 4th and final bundle is small, fitting easily into one hand. When the cloth falls away, it reveals a cup of old bronze, dulled by time to a green-brown softness. The rim is worn thin in one place, as though many lips once touched it. It holds nothing now, and yet of all the objects, it feels the fullest. A cup belongs to gathering. It belongs to hands meeting, voices mingling, and a room becoming more than a room because people have chosen to share it. It is fitting, then, that the last part of this story turns away from lonely mountains and wandering roads, and toward the city, where Dionysus was honored not only in wild rites, but in festivals, processions, songs, and plays. In ancient Athens, several festivals marked his presence through the turning year. Some were rural and close to the soil, tied to the pruning of vines and the work of farmers. Others belonged more clearly to the city, where laughter, competition, music, and public celebration gave the god a different kind of home. The greatest of these was the City Dionysia, held in spring when the seas had calmed enough for visitors to travel. A wooden image of the god was carried in procession, and the city gathered at the theater below the Acropolis. For several days, ordinary business was set aside, and Athens listened to tragic plays, to lighter satyr dramas, to comedy, to choruses moving together in trained and measured song. There is a beautiful balance in this. The same God who loosened boundaries also gave rise to one of the most ordered arts human beings have ever made. A play has structure. It has entrance and exit, chorus and voice, beginning and turning and end. Yet beneath that structure is the old Dionysian truth that people sometimes need a safe place to feel what daily life asks them to hide. The philosopher Aristotle later traced tragedy back to the dithyramb, an older choral song performed in honor of Dionysus. Before there were actors speaking as kings and queens, before masked performers stepped forward into named roles, there was a circle of voices singing to the god. From that circle, drama slowly emerged, one voice separating from the many. Then another. Then another. The word tragedy itself is often connected with the idea of a goat song, though scholars have long debated the exact path of the word. That uncertainty does not weaken the image. It softens it. Somewhere in the roots of the theater, there are choruses, animal skins, offerings, music, and the memory of a god whose presence turned ordinary speech into something larger. A performer named Thespis is remembered as the first to step forward from the chorus and speak alone in character. Whether history holds him exactly as legend does is less important here than the shape of the memory. One voice leaves the circle. One figure becomes another. The mask lifts the self out of itself, and theater begins. Others followed. A second actor was added, then a third. Stories grew more intricate. Choruses answered heroes. Cities watched themselves through myth. Grief became song. Fear became form. Questions too large for ordinary conversation found a stage, and the people sitting together in the open air could feel alone and not alone at the same time. The bronze cup rests cool in the archivist's palm. The oil lamp beside the bench burns low and steady, its flame small enough to invite sleep, but bright enough to shape the cup's rim in gold. There is nothing demanding in this final object. It does not ask to be filled. It only reminds the room that even emptiness can hold memory. Now the 4 relics are gathered: the broken wine jar, the ivy-wound fennel stalk, the quiet mask, and the old bronze cup. One by one, the archivist places them into a shallow bronze bowl lined with dried grape leaves. Each object settles without sound, as though finding the place it had been waiting for all night. Together, they hold the whole soft arc of Dionysus, the child born twice, the wanderer who carried vines through foreign lands, the god whose gifts turned grief into fruit and foolish gold back into water, the masked presence behind warning and release, and the festival god whose songs helped give birth to theater. The bowl is closed gently. The hand rests a moment on the lid, not to seal the story away, but to let it sleep. There is no need to remember the order of events. There is no need to hold the names. The names may drift now. Zagreus, Semele, Ampelus, Midas, Pentheus, Thespis. Each one may become only a soft sound, moving farther down a quiet hallway. The lamp has grown smaller. Its flame leans inward, steady and low. The hearth is only ash now, cool at the edges, with one hidden place still warm enough to remember fire. The high windows show a clear black sky. No rain touches the glass. No owl calls beyond the wall. The entire alcove seems to have folded itself around a single purpose: to let the listener rest. The stone floor is still. The woolen cloth is warm. The bench holds the body's weight without asking anything in return. The bronze bowl waits beside the niche, closed and complete, holding its 4 small relics in patient darkness. Nothing inside it needs to move. Nothing outside it needs to change. Breath comes and goes in its own time. The story has done all it came to do. It has opened the old clay, the dry ivy, the faded mask, and the quiet cup. It has let each one speak softly, and now it lets each one fall silent again. There is no need to follow the god any farther tonight. No road remains to walk. No mountain remains to climb. No theater remains to fill with voices. The city beyond the archive is asleep, and the archive itself is deeper than sleep, shelf after shelf resting in the dark. The lamp lowers. The room grows closer. The bowl is closed. The alcove is silent. The body may settle fully now, with nothing to prepare for and nothing to finish. Only the slow breath remains. Only the soft dark remains. Only rest. Only stillness. Only the gentle arrival of sleep.